To me, I was just doing my job, and probably like yourself, you know, when people try to shut you up, all it does is it strengthens your resolve. On that Monday morning, I'm driving into Dewsbury, and I get run off the A64 by 4 BMWs full of armed police. It's in the community hall in Savile Town, and it's a Sharia court.
Sharia tribunal. It's a Sharia tribunal.
It's a Sharia tribunal. The people who characterise themselves as journalists now, they're not journalists. They may well be in name, but they're just opinionators. I was incredibly proud of my profession and my history within it, yeah? And now I'm ashamed. It's almost like being at an AA meeting, you know. My name's Danny and I'm a journalist, you know. As a responsible journalist, you know, which is what we should do. Not just swallow...
Just as a responsible human.
Just not swallow Big Pharma's narrative, the bought and paid for politicians. There is not one single peer-reviewed study that shows man-made CO2 contributes to climate change. It's a fact. There is a widespread globalist, elitist agenda to basically unify global governance. And says, Mr. Lockwood, yeah, we've got intelligence that, you know, a group of people of interest are trying to find out where you live.
Information covered up, censorship, corruption. The mainstream media have proven itself to be untrustworthy. I'm here to give a platform for debate, for truth, for open discussion. I'm introducing you to my podcast, Silenced with Tommy Robinson.
Who exactly is Tommy Robinson, or Stephen Yaxley-Lane?
With the English Defence League, the EDL.
The problem is with Islamic
The English far-right Islamophobic activists.
Since then, there's been organised protests across the country in London, Manchester, Leeds. People in their thousands are marching for Robinson's release.
There is no such thing in this country as a Muslim.
Free Tommy Robinson!
Danny Lockwood was born and brought up in Dewsbury. He worked for 41 years in global media, from news, sport and current affairs, writing and editing in the UK, USA and Australia, plus wide-ranging experience in radio, TV and presenting. After a period with Johnson Press, he set up The Press, which was a free newspaper financed by advertising. He had a column there, which he wrote as Ed Lines. Much of what he reported did not go down too well with the local Muslims, to the extent that he has been threatened and demonstrated about. With a shared passion for journalism and exposing the truth, it's been my absolute pleasure to welcome Danny to join me on my podcast, Silenced. Danny, I'd like to thank you, Tommy, for coming to be a guest on my podcast. I'd like to say that we've become acquaintances, but I'd rather say we've become friends since meeting very long ago. I'll introduce you as a mainstream media journalist. We'll get onto that in a minute. Ouch. Yeah, I know. We'll let rip on it, but I want to hear first of all, because we spoke yesterday and you told the story to someone else about how we first become acquainted.
Yep.
Our first introduction.
Well, I suppose I should sort of preface that with saying I've been a journalist for 45 years. You say I'm mainstream media. I certainly was until a few years ago. But I've edited newspaper, mostly regional newspaper companies up and down England over the last 20, 30 years. I've worked with all of the national press at one level or another. In fact, when I set up my own publishing company in 2002, I turned down jobs from the Mail on Sunday and the Daily Telegraph, so I guess that's mainstream. Until recent years, I was quite a frequent guest on BBC Newsnight, worked with Channel 4, worked with BBC Radio, been on the Daily Politics, that sort of stuff. So I guess that's mainstream. But because I own my own publishing company the last 20 years, had the freedom, if you like, to set a proper news agenda and not follow sheep like the one that we see today in the MSM. So yeah, and that's the backdrop to how you and I met in early 2015. And just to explain that, I got a phone call from a Church of England vicar who was doing pastoral visits in the prison system. And he phoned me up, and I'd written a book in 2011 called The Islamic Republic of Dewsbury.
We'll get onto that. I want to go into that.
Yeah, which sets a little bit of a scene, if you like. And so this vicar phoned me up, and it served in Dewsbury, and he was aware of my book. And he phoned me up and said, Danny, there's a guy I think you should meet and tell his story. And I said, oh, who is it? The Pope? Archbishop Desmond Tutu? Someone, religious? He said, no, it's Tommy Robinson. I said, you expletive deleted, that expletive deleted. I said, there's nothing but bloody trouble wherever he goes, and we don't want to see it. We don't want to see him in Dewsbury of all places, staring up his expletive deleted. So, and he said, yeah. He said, I get it. He said, but I've seen him in solitary confinement. He's on hunger strike. This is a desperate young man, and no one will listen to his story, let alone believe it. He says, and of all the journalists I know, he says, you're the one guy that would get his story. So, based on the friendship I had with that vicar, I said, well, okay, I'll meet the guy, for what it's worth. So I think I got the train down to Peterborough, you drove up. We had a coffee, we went for a walk around town, we had the famous Tommy Robinson Nando's.
Of course. Had you had Nando's before that?
I don't think I had. And then I came away, I got the train home, and I just thought, I don't believe this. There's too much to take in, because I'm not saying I completely bought the mainstream narrative, but that's as much as anybody was getting. And what you told me was a story that if I had any self-respect or self-regard as a journalist, I had to at least have a look at. So I know when we parted, I said, listen, I'll look into a few of these things you've told me because, and I looked into all the things you told me, and I couldn't contradict a single one. At which point I thought, well, there's not only a grievous miscarriage of justice going on here, there's also a grievous deception of the wider public and what this guy is about and what he's angry. And back then you were always angry. You haven't changed that much.
Bit of angry man, as I'm known by my friends.
No, but I just thought, no, I owe it to my 40 odd years as a journalist to give this story an airing, however that would transpire. And so I came down to Luton. You showed me around the place, met quite a lot of your Muslim friends, which again is counter to the narrative that people are sold. I met your family and got to understand the real Tommy Robinson, and said, well, this is a story that has to be told. So, and as a result of that, I worked on your book with you, and ultimately, Enemy of the State.
His fault.
Yeah.
Well, I say his fault, but twice time #1 bestseller.
Yeah.
Can I? So I'll be. To the gentleman who introduced us.
Yeah.
A lovely man who I'd met when I set up the English Defence League. I was contacted by a vicar. Again, it's a vicar from the Church of England. Said, "Can I come and see you?" He travelled down and met me, put his hand on my lap, and said, "Do you mind if I say a prayer for you?" I've never felt close to God ever. Yeah. And then he sat there and he said a prayer, and he said, "I'm afraid you're going to be a sacrificial lamb in this battle, in this struggle." And then he sat and then he got to know me. And you're right. When I was in prison, he used his visits within the church to come in and visit me. And then because he used to be a journalist, right?
Yeah, in South Africa.
He was a journalist in South Africa. And then he said, so he originally, when I first met him, he said, "I want to tell your story through your eyes." And then he'd been offered a superior place, which was very important to him within the church for what he was doing. So then he introduced me to yourself, which I'm glad he did. I'm glad he did because we'll get onto this as well. This book, Islamic Republic of Dewsbury, you wrote in 2011, so we'd started the English Defence League 2 years prior.
Yeah.
And this basically tells the story of the change of Dewsbury. And when I put eyes on this, it's like walking my life through Luton. It was so similar. So it's like the experience I've seen and the change I've seen. So tell me explain this.
Okay. I'm Dewsbury born and bred, and the sort of parallels between Dewsbury and Luton are actually matched between my family and yours. I'm of an Irish Catholic background. My family were migrants 3 generations ago. Dewsbury is very much an immigrant town, you know, sort of post-industrial. We brought in a lot of South Asian families sort of through the late 50s, 60s. That absolutely catapulted through the 70s, 80s. You know, down in Luton, there was a different industry. In Dewsbury, it was textile industry, but we had a lot of mines. But, you know, it was entirely, if you like, a social change that certainly Dewsbury witnessed before, with not just the Irish coming in, but the Polish after the Second World War. So it was a town that was familiar with immigration as a part of its culture. But what it wasn't familiar with was the absolute separatism of this different, not just culture, but ideology, which actually endures to this day. So from my point of view, I went into journalism in 1978 on the Dewsbury Reporter. You know, I've worked in newspapers, as I said, all around the world, you know, from Dewsbury to Fleet Street and back. I came back in 1993 as the editor-in-chief of the group of newspapers that covers that part of Kirklees. North Kirklees is the sort of the political name for the area. And by that time, by 93, the change had very much become not evolutionary, but revolutionary. And the book actually starts with the first race riot that we had in town, which went back to 1989, which was sort of related to the Salman Rushdie riots, yeah?
Okay.
And I think then it was the BNP that came to Dewsbury to stir it up, and it all went Pete Dong, as they say. And the riots spread across town, and it involved that it became so it involved the traditional Dewsbury community versus the new sort of angry Muslim community. And from that point, everything changed. Everything changed. And it's almost as though there was, I doubt that it was taken as a decision. We've seen it in the grooming gang cases where they've actually had to admit it now in places like Rotherham and Rochdale and down the land. But where once the Muslim community started to assert itself,
Show force.
And once it took a step forward, all we did from that day to this is take a step back. And every time, you know, and so the political landscape was changing at that time as well. So they were starting to get elected Muslim councillors. They now own politics in Kirklees. Now they own politics in Kirklees. We'll get onto this character Pandor, I'm sure. But so the leader of Kirklees Council is Councillor Shabir Pandor,
Who starred in my recent documentary.
you know, his brother is Mohammed Amin Pandor, who works as actually the Muslim councillor at Bradford University and Leeds and Huddersfield University, but also
He's the one who provoked the.
he's the rabble rouser in chief. So
that
going
this is
back
to
to,
do with
going
school
back
and
to
bad-
2018 at the Almondbury School, where there was a playground spat between a Muslim lad and a white kid, who's out there in front of the gates, despite there being 40 mosques closer to that school than his patch. It's Mohammed Amin Pandor stirring up the hate, stirring up the trouble. You know, actually, Radio 4 exposed him a few years aw.
Did they?
Yeah, they did a.
Was this to do with a school teacher?
No, this is before that. They did a full. They did a full show on Pandor, absolutely pulling him to pieces.
BBC Radio 4.
BBC Radio 4 did. I'm sure if you Google it, you could probably still find it. And he was, you know, because he'd come out and criticise Strictly Come Dancing, and he's of the, you know, he's of the Deobandi tradition, which is the ultra conservative. Down in Luton, you've got Wahhabi and Salafi, kind of the fundamental strains of Islam. Up in Dewsbury, we've got the Deobandis.
Am I right that Dewsbury is the home of the head centre for them?
Well, it's you can argue whether it's Bury or Dewsbury, but you know, in 1978, I think the Saudis funded the building of the Makazi Mosque, which
What's that? What's the Makazi Mosque?
The Makazi Mosque is the biggest teaching mosque outside Saudi Arabia.
This is a Tablighi Jamaat one.
It's the HQ of Tablighi Jamaat in the UK. In fact, just as a little aside, in 2012, the EDL were planning a rally in Dewsbury, and I was editorialising, telling you to bugger off somewhere where you can make a difference, because you certainly couldn't in Dewsbury. You didn't show, and as a result, a carload of terrorists that came to blow up the centre of my hometown found that everybody had gone. So they went to the Makazi Mosque to pay homage there.
There's video of them walking through the mosque.
There's video of them, and on the way home down the M1, the police pulled the car over because it had no insurance. I'm sure they didn't think they'd be driving home that day. And of course, I think the next thing...
They didn't find the bombs.
No, they found them 2 days later.
They took the... It's like something out of Four Lions. It's like something out of a comedy sketch. These Muslims have gone up there. They've gone to blow it up. They get there 2 hours late. So they walk through the scene of where we were, or would have been, 2 hours late. And then they go home, no insurance, get pulled in, car gets seized. 2 days later, in the compound, they look in the boot. Suicide notes, bombs, guns, everything.
I think they got 18 or 19 years apiece between them.
Yeah, maybe 25 even.
Okay.
I went to their case.
See, I'm sure you did. So the Makazi is fundamental in more ways than one to Dewsbury. It sits right at the heart of Savile Town, which was a working class sort of terraced house, part of Dewsbury Town Centre, which is now 99.9% Muslim.
Did our government see this sect, the Deobandi sect, as the future of Islam in Britain?
Well, yeah, that doesn't surprise me. What does surprise me is that they would even understand the differences in the different traditions.
That's from Tom Robinson. Bishop Tom Robinson?
Yeah.
From Pontefract?
I think it is. Yeah.
So the church set up a meeting when I was leading the English Defence League with us to sit down with Islamic scholars in a church premises to get over the table and say what our problems are. Yeah. And they brought a lead cleric from the Golden Dome Mosque, and it was from the Deobandi sect. And when they sat us down in the church, they explained that MI5 and the security services see this sect, the Deobandis, as the future leading sect of Islam.
Well, so in terms of, just to finish how that book came about, I have obviously, I was editor-in-chief at the Reporter Group from 93 to 99. I went off then and I edited groups down in the Cotswolds and up in Lancaster. And then I worked as a consultant on national newspapers and magazines. And I trained generations of journalists. But in 2002, I set up my own publishing company, headquartered in Dewsbury. I launched a newspaper called The Press, which really, at a time when the mainstream media was starting to, it just didn't recognise the problems. This is before we knew all about the grooming gangs. This was before, if you like, a lot of the problems that predominantly Muslim towns were starting to experience. Before that became mainstream, I was in a position where we could report it truthfully and honestly. And it came at a cost. It came at a cost to me personally, in my business, to my family. You'll be aware of that. But I'm old school journalist in that the truth will out. And for me, it was never about the creed.
I used to be shocked by the front pages of your newspaper because no newspaper reported it the way you did.
Well, I lost my best friend at the age of 33, 34 to a heroin overdose. I have so many friends of my age and generation who've lost their kids to heroin overdoses. And I'm going back now to 1996 when a leader of the national, what's the charity? I want to say Lifeline. But anyway, he stood up there and said, just for your information, Dewsbury has a worse heroin problem than inner city London or Liverpool or Glasgow. He says the average age of your addicts is about 4 or 5 years younger than the average. And the reason that we do is because, whereas in Leeds, if you like, if you wanted cannabis or cocaine, the Leeds gangs kind of ran it. In Dewsbury and Batley and in our area, it was heroin.
Why was it?
Because it was imported from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and they controlled the drugs trade. So, when I do guided tours, when I take David Aranovich, the Times, ex-Times and BBC journalist, when I take him on a guided tour for a 5 Live documentary he's doing, I said to him, do you want to see criminal Islam at work, or do you want to see fundamentalist Islam at work? And then I'll take him down a street where I used to live, Lee's home in Thornhill Lees, and so on. And that was my house, and just around the corner there was the house of Mohammed Siddiq Khan. Mohammed Siddiq Khan, who left his home in July 2005 to go lead his little gang to blow up London.
7 bombers.
So you've got all the world and all the complexities all in one small town.
Did he go to the Tablighi Jamaat Mosque?
He was actually from Leeds originally, but he married a Dewsbury girl. The mosque kind of tries to distance itself. But they'd all prayed there at some time or other. But, you know, if you ask me, we've got more radical mosques in Dewsbury than that one.
How many mosques have you got in Dewsbury? Do you know?
Last count, there were probably, I think it's a couple of years because I moved out of town. But it was probably over 40. It may well be much more than that now. But of course, you know, we said Dewsbury, but Dewsbury's big rival town is Batley. And Batley, I could have called that the Islamic Republic of Batley just as easily. There's only 2 miles between the town halls. And so, you know, and across that entire community now, it is, I haven't seen the numbers from the last census, but certainly within a couple of miles, you know, the urban parts of Dewsbury and Batley are overwhelmingly now Muslim.
I saw a piece you done with a national newspaper. I saw a journalist who done a report on Savile Town.
Sue Reed from the Daily Mail, I think that would have
Sue
been.
Reed from Daily Mail. And you took her around, and the demographical change of Savile Town, that's what it was 96%.
No, it's not. It was like 99.5.
9.5% Muslim.
Yeah. In fact, I actually found a couple of the only white residents left, and Sue went and interviewed one of the ladies, you know, about it. And you know, gets along great with her neighbours. This isn't, and that book is not about, you know, sort of trying to do anything other than just reflect the sociological change of my town.
Do you think our politicians understand what the change of a town like that looks like? Do you think they understand the consequence socially of the changes? When a town changes like that, what's it like there? Say for example in Dewsbury, with the influence of the Islamic religion, what's it like for women?
It's 2 towns. It has, in fact, you know, my mum always used to go down to Dewsbury. Dewsbury had the biggest outdoor market in the UK at one point, and it was a award-winning market. And every Saturday I'd go shopping with my mum, and all my aunties would be down there, and you'd see all the women, and it was just almost like a social event. You know, you just don't see those people in that town anymore, because of course what that book tries to convey to people is that, for instance, you know, Dewsbury Market, you know, may as well be walking through a bazaar in Southeast Asia. You know, we couldn't sustain. I mean, Woolworths and Marks and Spencers went quite long ago. We couldn't even sustain the town centre McDonald's. You know, because obviously and it's natural when you understand it, in that if the customer base changes so radically as it has over the last 30, 40 years, everything changes to reflect it.
Culture changes.
So it's not a surprise, you know, that churches and pubs are now madrasas and mosques. That's not to point fingers. That just is what happens when you get a systemic change like that. You know, I've moved out of Dewsbury. I got my family to a safe place because of the problems.
Can I talk about that?
Yeah.
Let's talk about, so you're a journalist, you run in a mainstream newspaper. Your newspaper was reporting openly about drug gangs, criminal gangs, religious gangs. You were openly, when I say openly, I was, as I say, surprised. And just surprised because I'm from Luton and I look at our newspaper and they just shy away from it. They just don't go near it. You were investigating them.
Well, you know,
heavily.
There's a reason why the BBC's investigations editor wanted me to go down and train BBC journalists not that long ago. As I said, it is not about the creed or the colour. It's about the criminality. And I was with a detective chief superintendent once, and I said, and I was speaking to if you're familiar with it was a forum of civic leaders. So there were people from the council, there were police, and I was there to talk about the work we did, because this ran counter to anything that they were willing to own up to. And I said, well, you know, listen, the drugs trade in Dewsbury is 95% run by, I'm not going to call them Pakistani or Gujarati gangs, I'm going to call them Muslim gangs, because that is actually the defining characteristic. Not the country, it is the creed in this case.
When you say country, because Gujarati is Indian.
There's a little Indian flag on the cover of my book. And it wasn't on the original one, because people automatically think, you know, with a large Pakistani community. And that's true. And in Dewsbury as a whole, it would be more Pakistani than Gujarati Indian. But in Savile Town, which is the spiritual and commercial and political home of Islam in our area, those people are all from basically the cities of Bharuch and Surat in Gujarat. And they came there first, the Patels. So, the most powerful mosque in Savile Town isn't the big one. It's another one called the Zachariah Mosque. And that's run by a charitable foundation called the Islamic Muslim Patel Foundation. And so the
What difference does that
Patels
make?
run the show.
What difference does that make? So say in Savile Town, what difference does it make if it's a spiritual home and it's the Gujaratis? What difference does that make, say, to property value or things like that in the community?
A 2-bedroom house in Savile Town, a terraced 2-bedroom house in Savile Town, will cost twice as much as one a mile and a half away across the River Calder.
In a similar
Twice
Pakistani
as much.
community?
I always said there's 2 things you never see in Savile Town. That's dogs on the street
Houses
and for sale signs outside houses.
they're sold.
Because they go within the family. They go within the family. And
Because they want to be
so Savile Town alone has 8 mosques, and you can throw a blanket over the place. So, but again, that's like Mayfair, it's the Desiree's place to be, and the power brokers, certainly in terms of religion, tend to Gujarati, but the MPs, Dewsbury's MPs probably don't understand that over the years, although one of them would, Shahid Malik, till we got rid of him, so it's, and like I say, when I talk about the price you pay for doing that, Shahid Malik, who was our MP from 2005 to 2010, he sued me for libel.
He sued you for libel from this book?
No.
For something you reported?
Our politics have been bought and paid for years and years,
What
and I've said that.
What do you mean
bought
by
and
that?
paid for? Well, because the Labour Party is owned by the Muslim community.
The Labour Party is owned by the Muslim community in Dewsbury and Batley.
So, for instance, I'm interviewing Ed Miliband in Dewsbury Town Hall in 2000 and whenever he was leader, and then so Danny, how do you think we'll do it? I said, you've got it bought and paid for, mate, no problem. And yet right now they've got a Conservative MP, because every time they put a Labour MP in, they bugger it up, if you'll pardon my French, like Malik did. They sow division, they pander to that one community, and that creates resentment. So you've got communities growing apart, not closer together. And because the police won't challenge the bad behaviour, they're having to now with the child grooming. They arrested over 100 a couple of years ago. I think they charged 42.
I think there was 100 arrests, which is the most arrests per square mile than anywhere else.
And that was only scratching the surface. But because of the problems that we've inherently had, and nobody was dealing with it, and there was blatant corruption in the one election in 2006, and the Conservative councillor who lost his seat with a 100% swing in the vote, fathom that out, he wrote a letter that went in both my newspaper, The Press, and the Dewsbury Reporter. And Shahid Malik sued me and my paper, but not him, but not the other one. When we get to, and you'll understand our libel trials, my friend.
Yeah, come. This is where the law. So they've used. Okay, let's get onto it. So you've published a letter which makes allegations against Shahid Malik.
No, it didn't. It actually just said that he was there watching when it all happened.
When there was fraud.
That's it.
Okay.
So pretty tenuous libel, but the other paper agreed to shut up, and I told him where to shove it.
Okay.
£500,000 worth of costs later, with a 2-week trial at the High Court in London, and the judge in the stall, and how this happens, says, oh, by the way, you can't have that witness, Baroness Saida Varsi, because I basically got Saida into politics, not that she'd admit that now. You can't have that witness, you can't have that witness. Oh, and by the way, you can't have this evidence in. The fact that the letter was in another paper, and he's not sued then. So we were not allowed to even reference that. I, of course, when I'm in the witness stand, absolutely referenced it. Malik, under cross-examination, admitted it. And the jury, because we had a jury, that's what saved us.
You had a jury for long?
We had because this is 2007 when it got to court. It changed after that. And the jury sat there and thought, what's going on here? They're all looking at each other. What's going on here? Because
why is he going for him?
And
there's something else going on.
Sir David Eady, who was the lead High Court judge then, just like Matthew Nicklin was in your case, it's kind of like, oh God, what have I done? Because when the jury went out, they came back, said, we can't reach a verdict. He said, well, I'll take a majority, 11-1, 10-2. No, you're not even close, mate. 9-3, no, we can't reach a verdict. They had 10 questions that they read out that they had for him, and he was just going redder and redder because he couldn't answer them because he'd ruled them out in his when he was setting the stall for the, and you know how that works. So it was a hung jury. So he said, right, we'll come back next year for 3 weeks. At which point, Malik's lawyers, Bindman's, who are the Labour Party's pet lawyers, they said, we're not throwing more bad money after this.
Do you mind if I ask how much money you threw this?
We were about just short of about £100,000 down.
You don't get that back.
You don't get that back. We're about 100 down.
So lawfare,
Yeah,
essentially was used,
yeah.
and they didn't go after the other newspaper because the other newspaper wasn't reporting.
The other newspaper just
About
said,
anything else.
we'll be good boys,
Okay.
So I feel your pain where libel's concerned. The difference being that we had a jury and that saved us, and today we would have suffered exactly the same fate as you.
If you didn't have a jury, yeah, because a judge would have ruled with Shalid Malik, the lady.
Yeah, it was good. It did everything except that anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, I was I don't know if I can tell this. I was reported for. I've probably been accused of contempt or dragged before judges for contempt, and I was writing his name as Adam Wankowski, and somebody faxed him it. I said, "Stop the trial, clear the jury. May we approach the bench, my lord?" "Yes, Mr. Wolanski, what is it?" "Mr. Lockwood has been guilty of a grievous contempt of court. He's been calling me Wankowski." and Edie goes into his chambers right at the back of and we're in court 13.
Laughs
the
his
big
head
one.
off.
We could hear him laughing, And he comes back and says, "Yes, Mr. Wolanski." He said, "I believe that this is what's called a typographical error. Now can we get on with business?" So anyway, yeah, there wasn't much to laugh about at the time. But
Tell me, so that was some pressures. You've been taken through the courts. You've been hit for £100,000. Did anyone try and sue you over this?
no,
Okay.
no, that was celebrated in Savile. They loved that.
Because to them, you've just detailed what they've done.
Yeah, but and although the title of the book, on the face of it, can be a little bit provocative. Actually, it's not. It's just historically accurate and reflective of the change. And that's I wrote a final edition in 2015 because between the first one and that, a lot of the bad guys that's referenced in the first book we'd managed to put away in prison. Because I'm quite proud of some of the
Investigate. You were doing essentially your newspaper was doing the police's job.
We've ended political careers by
Exposing the criminal
exposing
links.
the corruption, the electoral fraud, the criminal financial economic fraud, and so yeah, I'm proud of what we did.
Where can people get this book?
It's on Amazon. It's unlike your latest book, Silence, which of course was taken off without any reason given. That is still for sale. Islamic Republic of Dewsbury, Danny Lockwood.
Danny, you were one of the first people in this country to detail and confront the Islamisation issue, to talk about the consequences of the Islamisation issue.
Yeah.
Well, you've just spoke about court. You've spoke about what was it like. We know Savile Town, 99% Muslim, Dewsbury, 40 mosques. I know what it's like living in a community like that. I know how on top it can come living in a community like that. What was it like running a newspaper, which, as we've said, you were doing similar to police-style investigations into criminality, into corruption, and you were front paging it, week in, week out.
Yeah.
What pressures did that bring personally for you?
It brought more for my family than it did for me, because to me I was just doing my job, and probably like yourself, when people try to shut you up, all it does is it strengthens your resolve to do the job. I'm an old school journalist,
You're an old school Yorkshireman.
And I'm an old school Yorkshireman. I don't like being told what to do, and even, so a few years, so we get a new chief superintendent in Dewsbury, in Kirklees, and so the first thing she does is, I've just been filming Daily Politics at Westminster Studios. I've come out, phone call, Detective Constable so-and-so, can you go and hand yourself into the nearest police station? I'm walking through London. I said, why? Can't tell you. We need to DNA you and fingerprint you. I said, no. So I get back, I call my solicitor, and he says, well, whatever it is, Danny, you need to. So I phoned him up and I said, well, I'm in Dewsbury on Monday, Tuesday, I'm in the office, so I'll pop along if you want, and I'll come and give with my solicitor, and I'll give her, whatever you want under caution, and I'll find out exactly what it is. It was actually an offence of littering.
What year was this?
This was 2018.
After you wrote my book?
Yeah. Also, I think after the Observer had kind of slated me for giving you an interview.
Let me get this. So the timeline is, a female was beaten, had her teeth smashed out in Batley, I believe, by some Muslim men. I went up, done an interview with her. The same time I was done an interview with her, you walked me around Batley and Dewsbury.
Just explaining
Explaining what we're talking about now.
Yeah.
And then the Observer national newspaper done a 2-page spread attacking you.
A 2-page hit piece, yeah.
Attacking you as...
Just the guy that sows discontent in this community with his outrageous, sort of reporting. Which I've not had a single complaint about that book from the Muslim community. By the way, I have a lot of Muslim friends, as you do. People just don't see that.
Yeah.
So when Mohammed Amin Panda was getting ridiculed by, for instance, BBC Radio 4, I rang his brother up, Shabir, leader of the council, still taking my phone calls, and he's calling his brother all the things under the sun. So, but you won't print that, will you, Danny? No, Shabir, And if it's off the record with me, it's off the record. So, but all of a sudden, everything starts coming downhill from then. And I phoned the constable up, the detective cell. I'm willing to come in to be interviewed under caution. Okay. On that Monday morning, I don't hear back from them. On that Monday morning, I'm driving into Dewsbury, and I get run off the A64 by 4 BMWs full of armed police, and I'm locked up, held without being able to call my wife, transferred to Dewsbury, interviewed under caution, DNA and everything.
For what crime?
For littering on the doorstep of the local MP. The local MP at that time, Paula Sheriff, she wrote for me. She wrote a column for me. She told the new chief superintendent, Julie Sykes, this isn't Danny Lockwood you've seen on that CCTV image. It's nothing like him.
She'd already told them it wasn't you.
Already told them it wasn't me.
And you've got armed police dragging out
And
the
I've
car.
got armed police, yeah, So, and then of course they throw you out of the police station, and you cast 35 miles away, but you make your own way there, pal. And
no charges?
No charge. No, because and when I complain, so I file an IOPC complaint, it takes them a year to do that. And when it comes back, they said, oh, well, you didn't get your phone call because the custody suite was very busy. We didn't do that right because of this and blah, blah, because of that. And as for you offering to come in to be interviewed under caution, Detective Constable Plod, when we examined his notes, he'd written that Mr. Lockwood had offered to come in to be interviewed under caution. And the Chief Superintendent and Detective Chief Inspector were stood listening to the conversation, by the way. And when we questioned him about that, Detective Constable Plot said, oh yes, I can see there how my note-taking doesn't really reflect what I meant to say. What I meant to say was Lockwood displayed a come-and-get-me attitude. He says, so we're upholding that element of Mr. Lockwood's complaint, and as a result...
I'll come in Monday.
and as a result, Detective Constable Plod has been spoken to by a senior officer about his note-taking, and that was it. See you later.
Well, what do you think? What do you think in 2018 their motive was behind that? What do you think?
Well, I know that
the reason.
The police, back in the day, because remember I've been editor there since '93.
Yeah.
A new chief super comes in. The first thing he does is rings me. I go down. We have a coffee. We sit down. He says, "Tell me about the town's problems. Tell me about how we can work together. What we can do for you. What you can do for us." It was a first name sort of relationship. These days,
this new super comes in. She wants to let you know.
And she's not the first. She's not the first that's like this. They took the headquarters of the division out of Dewsbury into Huddersfield just to give themselves even more separation. Because every time the Muslim community got upset, the several hundred of them would descend on the police station and surround it. Sometimes complaining about me if they didn't like an editorial or a story. But
they put pressure and numbers on the police.
And it was the same characters involved with all of them. So what, really? But the police's attitude has changed towards that community and towards people like me, and so we were seen really as not as an ally in trying to uphold the fight.
You're a problem
against
because you're reporting what's going on.
We're a problem because we're an uncomfortable truth in their presence, and so she was new in. We'll show Lockwood who's boss.
That's so you're dragged out of a car by armed police for nothing.
For nothing. Yeah.
What about, you spoke about, you're a big guy, you talk to me about the effect on your family. You just said about the effect on your family, because you're growing up, your family are growing up.
Yeah.
Where are your family living at this time when you run?
We live right in the middle of Dewsbury, so that I can hit a golf ball down Leeds Road and it'll roll into the back door of the town hall. So, and my wife is not from the area, so it was real culture change for her. She worked on Fleet Street when we met. But it was more the kids. I could and still do. I can walk around Savile Town. They had a big Ijtima, a Muslim festival, about 3 or 4 years ago. 50,000 people descend on the town for a weekend. I went along to it. When Hafiz Patel, the man that built the Makazi Mosque with Saudi money, when he passed away in 2015, I went to his funeral. There's 2 police community support officers, 8,000 Muslim men, and me.
No women.
Oh no, there's no women. Did I feel unsafe? No.
Now, do you think that's because they show a level of respect to you?
Well.
In the level, because
one or two people on that occasion, one or two would say to me, "So, what are you doing?" I said, "I've come to pay my respects to Mr. Patel. A big character in this town. I probably knew more about him than a lot of them did. Some of the younger guys get a bit edgy, but so what? And so they would, what are you doing here? And I say, I've come to pay my respects, pal. You got a problem with that? Oh, they don't. So yeah, it's every day. But at that point, my son was 12, 13, my daughter 11, and they were of an age where their peer groups, and my son was at a Hetman Dwight Grammar School, which was very mixed, and he was starting to get targeted because I was his dad.
By other Muslim kids.
And at that point, that's, and I spoke to the headmaster about it, and he basically put his hands up and said, what can we do, So that was it. I drove over to York, saw this beautiful barn conversion, rented it on the spot, and literally within 6-8 weeks I'd moved my family out, and we're still in that area now. But I'm in Dewsbury all the time. My family are all there still, so, and I don't, there are parts of Dewsbury and Batley, there have been no-go areas for a long, long time. Nobody would walk, any white bloke or woman walking through there on the night is asking for trouble.
Now.
For a long time.
For a long time. So the media, because the mainstream media would say that's a myth.
No, it's a lie. It's absolute, and they police themselves, by the way.
The police don't get called.
I don't know if it's in my book, but I told a story of a guy that was up doing a roof, and there'd been a lot of, and somebody recognised his van. I said, that's the guy that's been going in and robbing Muslim houses. And all of a sudden there's a mob surrounding him, The guy that owns the house comes back, said, whoa, you've got the wrong guy here. I can vouch for this bloke, yeah? A couple of days later, he gets a phone call. Oh, you're required to come to a meeting. Well, what's that about? It's in your best interest to come. Are you sure? Yeah, if you want to work in our community again, if you want to do any more roofing jobs, you're going to come. So he goes along, and he goes in there, and it's in the community hall in Savile Town. And it says Sharia court.
Sharia tribunal. It's a Sharia tribunal.
It's a Sharia tribunal because they're, are you willing to accept the apology and everything of this man who's led the rabble? If not, we will take action against him. And so
because they've disrespected the other Muslims.
Because they've disrespected, yeah. So he accepts he just wants to get out of there. So he accepts the guy's apology. There's 2 police officers sat there.
Watching it.
There's 2 police officers overseeing,
Overseeing a Sharia tribunal.
Yeah. So you couldn't make it up, and so I put that to the West Yorkshire Police press office, and you get nothing back, No. Oh, this wasn't a Sharia thing. It was a community resolution.
Community resolution
meeting. Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah. So it's I could tell.
In your opinion, for towns like Dewsbury now, what is the future for a town like that? And Batley, what is the future?
Okay. Well, when I updated that book in 2015, I subtitled it Requiem, because that was basically me.
Which means what?
That is like eternal rest. It's like the closing tribute.
Rest in peace,
It's
Dewsbury.
Rest in peace, Dewsbury. It's we've thrown the last shovel of dirt on top of the coffin.
That's how I feel about Luton.
Well, and that's perhaps a little bit unfair, and that may well be me painting a bigger picture than some people will recognise on the ground, because there's still a very large white community. The vast majority of my family still lives in the area. A lot of them have migrated out, towards villages and communities a couple of miles out of town, because there is unfortunately not been the sort of cultural mixing which sort of the lovely lefties always hoped that we would get. And that's because just ideologically it is, and certainly within Deobandis and and your Salafi and Wahhabis, it's forbidden to mix.
Do you know
we are still the kuffar, as much as there is a veneer of politeness and civility, never the twain shall meet, So, and
Do you know that the gentleman who introduced us, Bishop of Pontefract, when we had that meeting, they said we've been getting together as communities, and we had a Christmas lunch, and then I just said, with these gentlemen here, I said, was there women there? No. Did you have wine? No. So you had a Sharia compliant Christmas lunch. So your idea to solve these solutions is to totally bend everything.
And they have interfaith groups. Hey, listen,
Interfaith groups.
My newspaper, and it's just a talking shop, and again, it's just this artifice to pretend that there is real community. Some of the Muslim community groups in Dewsbury and Batley do phenomenal work. Yeah, phenomenal work. When there were the floods up in Lancaster, they were up there in numbers, doing really valuable charitable work. My newspaper is not that one-sided. We carry all the good news that comes out of those communities, and there's a lot of it. Yeah. Because that is our community. And if we didn't do that, well, then we would be rightly stigmatized as being racist, and that ain't what we are or what we were, because we wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes if we hadn't been trying to do a fair job. Yeah, and when Shahid Malik lost his seat, I remember him coming into my office in 2004 when he was going to run for office as MP, and he came and we shook hands, and I said, okay, what's your agenda, Shahid, apart from obviously being an ambitious young politician? Well, I wanted to set something out straight first, Danny. I said, what's that? He said, I don't do packy politics. And I understood what he meant, What
did he mean?
Well, one set of politics for the mainstream, for the media, for journalists, for the wider community, but then a completely set of politics where he is reflecting the demands of the mosques and of his own community. So, he was two-faced politics. Now, we know that they all are, but not when it's so ideologically kind of divided. But he assured me I don't do that, Danny. And I think that in his heart of heart, because I got along well with him for long enough.
I gave
him a chance, and he gave me a chance, and it was pretty fair, And when even though Sayeeda Varsi ran against him, now Baroness Varsi, and that'll laugh. Even though she ran against him, and I effectively gave her a first public platform writing in my newspaper, to me, I don't do party politics on that level. I'm just trying to be fair to everybody and give an open forum for debate. And I gave Malik the chance to prove that he was as good as his word, and he wasn't. And flash forward, and he sat with Dewsbury's villain in chief, a remarkable little scrote called Tahir Zaman. I don't mind saying that.
He's the mobster, the gang leader of
he's
criminality. Allegedly.
He's more of a. He dresses up like the prophet does, Terry. He dresses all in white, flowing robes, hat on, and everything. And last I heard, he was reportedly on the run. I don't know if that's true. He'd been struck off as a director for massive fraud. But he has untold influence over the Labour Party politics. It was in court 2019. He was due in court, and one of his witnesses he was calling was the local white councillor, Paul Kane, who was head of planning, and Terry was up for breaching planning regulations, and the night before he was due to appear, Paul Kane hung himself.
The councillor,
Hung himself.
the Labour councillor.
Yeah, because nobody could prove anything. I went with his girlfriend to the inquest.
Well, maybe he hung himself.
I went. Oh, yeah. No, he was humiliated. I know this personally because I knew his girlfriend well. He was personally humiliated that he was having to give evidence on behalf of Terry's a man
Who's known locally.
who's known as just
Am I right that they're-
wrong, and it's terrible and it's tragic. I consider Paul a friend of mine, even though Labour Party don't get along with me. We lived on the same road. You know, I've known Paul a lot of years, but tragically he ended his life. And the judge, of course, didn't want to know. The judge, the coroner. Just, we're not here to determine why Mr. Kane did this, but how he died. And he says, and I am not taking this here in this inquest outside of that orbit. And so that was that. So, but yeah, as a man, his time will come.
Currently wanted possibly for...
Well, I've the word has it that he's wanted it in connection with the the sort of historic sex crime operations that we've referred. I can't.
100%.
That as far as I'm concerned has to remain hearsay because. Okay. But I did get a phone call a few months ago from a contact, a Muslim businessman who rang me from Islamabad. I said, Danny, I said, hello. How are you doing, mate? Where are you? I said, I'm in Islamabad. You won't believe who I've just run into. I said, who? He says, I said, not our little friend, Terry. Yeah, Terry's a man. I said, what's he doing in Islamabad? He said, you tell me, but I understand he's got more trouble coming.
Did you find with the Muslim group, because when I was doing my investigations into Telford, not just Telford actually, in Barrow as well. In Barrow, a lot of them opened their doors to me, were very welcoming and giving me a lot of information. Did you find over the years when you're doing your investigations up there, that rival families, rival fractions, rival criminal gangs?
Listen, they fall out on an industrial scale, you know, and yeah, so it will at different times. When Sayed Avasi divorced her imported husband, yeah,
The arranged marriage.
The arranged marriage. She divorced him and she married, and I'd seen her at one or two functions. Oh crikey, who was the Queen, the former Prime Minister of Pakistan, the lady, she was assassinated. My mind's, you know what I mean. Yeah. Beautiful lady. She came to Dewsbury Town Hall and Saida invited me along as a guest, and I'd seen Saida with this one eligible, chap, good-looking bloke, businessman. I thought they're about the same age, they were at school together. And so I kind of sensed there was something more than met the eye there. And sure enough, suddenly they're married. And she'd got a quick divorce in the Sharia court.
Sharia divorce.
Yeah, and I get a phone call, and it's the best friend of her ditched husband saying, you do know that the fella she's married,
still married,
his wife doesn't know that she's been divorced. I said, get away. So I look into this, and it was absolutely true. All he's done is he's moved his wife, mother of his 3 or 4 kids, he's moved her across the road in with his in-laws. She barely speaks a word of English because she was an imported bride.
He doesn't have a passport.
And she doesn't even know.
She doesn't even know that he's got
She doesn't even know that he's divorced and got.
She doesn't speak English, doesn't come out of the house.
So I thought, that's too good a story for me. So I phoned up the news editor of the Mail on Sunday. I said, I've got a belter here for you lads, So I thought, a nice thousand quid in my back pocket, And they did a big expose. The Baroness who's,
The Baroness who's still dating the man who's still married. Who's married the man that's still married.
Well, he had divorced her. Okay. She just didn't know.
She didn't know.
So, yeah, listen, I mean, all the world's a stage. And in a town like Dewsbury, you've no shortage of vested interests who are playing one another off against themselves. But at the same time, and like when I'm training young journalists, and some of the ones I've sort of developed over the years have done far better in journalism than I have. You know, far more household names than I'll ever be. But it ain't, you know, you just can't take anything at trust. You know, everybody that comes here with a story,
There's an agenda.
there's an agenda or an angle, you know. So how many sides to a story are there? 2, boss. No, there's a lot more than 2. There's however many sides to a story as bear witness to it. Yeah. So listen, you know, you just be diligent, do the job, and at times you'll have to make judgment calls. That's what part of it's about. You know, that's the process, and you're gonna have to at times trust your gut. But the fact is, you know, there are mechanisms that you're being taught here that will guide you through being a good journalist. You know, so
Do you see many good journalists out there now?
I don't see any. There are 1 or 2, you know.
Do you think they're journalists or reporters?
But actually, when I say good journalists, a lot of them have become, the people who characterise themselves as journalists now, like for instance on GB News, they're not journalists. They may well be in name, but they're just opinionators. They're just there to pontificate and kind of represent their own newly narrowed sort of narrative. And that's fine, but that's not what a journalist does. You know, a journalist explores, examines, inquires, informs, entertains. You know,
That's the case.
if you're good at what you do, and within that, you hope that the disciplines that you've learned over the years serve you well. I'm not going to embarrass this lad by naming him, but he was one of the, you know, one trainee that I developed and sent on his way, and he's got a terrific job and profile, and he's a good journalist, and he works on a national newspaper. His bylines on front pages every day, and I know that he's doing his job. But his job is, if you like, within a particular orbit,
Controlled.
He's not. He doesn't have free rein to go off and do this, do that. Well, I got offered a job by Jonathan Holborough when he was the editor of the Mail on Sunday, and he obviously saw something in me at that time, and he said, "I want you to be my man at large, Danny. You know, Baghdad next week if it's over there, Hollywood next week if it's over there." You know, and I'm thinking, wow, what an opportunity, you know. But at the time, I was the editor-in-chief of a newspaper group, 2 young kids. Could I do that to my wife and family? And I couldn't at the time, you know. So you make decisions. At that time, I think I would have taken my honesty to a you know, onto a national newspaper, yeah, where I'd like to think that I maintained that sort of integrity. How long I would have been allowed to is a different thing altogether, isn't it? You know, back then maybe I would have got away with it. These days, absolutely not. I just think that it's unless you've got a particularly high profile and you can get away, you know, with opinion pieces, that it's mostly controlled, and never more so than through the pandemic, obviously.
Well, I'll just tell you straight, Danny. Over the last however many years, if I there's not many people I ring for an opinion, and I know you tell me straight, you're being an arsehole. You're this. You're gonna fuck that. You know, so there's not many people who you can speak to in a black and white way, or who give you the true account of it, and you're one of them. Well, you're on this. If I was ringing and saying, "What do you think of this?"
Yeah. Well,
because I know you're going to tell me straight.
Well, that's, you know.
Don't be a dickhead.
I'll take it as a compliment. But you know, you can only listen. In life, we all come this way once.
Yeah.
And if you can't be true to yourself, what's the point? Yeah. And that's the shame of my profession. I was chairman of the Yorkshire Guild of Editors when we had probably 30 editors, you know, of proper newspapers around the county. I was a director of the UK Guild of Editors. That's now the Society of Editors. I signed the paper that transformed the Guild, the UK Guild, to the UK Society. You know, I've spoken at the national conferences. I was incredibly proud of my profession and my history within it, yeah? And now I'm ashamed. It's almost like being at an AA meeting, you know. My name's Danny and I'm a journalist, you know. And
alternative journalist, that's what I tell people. So what do you do? I'm an alternative journalist. Don't worry, I'm not one of them.
No, I'm not the one that's changed. Yeah, I'm not the one that's changed. They have, and they've got to look in the mirror and, you know, and they're the ones that have got to say, am I being honest? And most of them are. But unfortunately, what's happened as well is we've trained a new generation of journalists in this alternative
Woke world.
world, And so in that, I guess I'm a dinosaur, But that's the way it is.
That's one thing, label you a dinosaur. John Sweeney labelled you something very different. So in my panorama expose, when I had the undercover recording and Lucy Brown recorded John Sweeney, and he was talking about someone from the Amazonian
rainforest.
He was talking about meeting a working class man in the green room.
Yeah, it's like did he describe it as like being something from outer space?
From outer space, it was something like a creature.
Because
you were a creature.
I'd been on Newsnight, because I've been on quite a few times, and we're in the green room having a beer, and Sweeney's come down, and we're sort of an age, of a generation. I'd never met him before, but we had a lot of...
He was a big school journalist.
Oh, yeah. And we knew a lot of the same people, but he knew me by reputation as well. And so we had a couple of beers, and he was a two-faced arsehole. Because, he actually came to have a laugh at the flat-voweled West Yorkshire,
working class man.
Working class bloke, which, I think probably the producers and he's like, oh, God, we've got a keeper here. Look, he sounds just like,
Just sounds like the rest of the people.
So, and of course, I was an ardent Brexiteer, so I could at least articulate my views on that. And so when I
sent you
when you sent me the clip of
as soon as I heard it, I was like,
when you sent me the clip of Sweeney saying that about me, I phoned up a very senior person at the BBC, nominally his boss. And I said, have you got Sweeney's number? Can I have it? She says, why? I says, because I owe him a slap. Oh, Danny, I said, yeah, I've just heard what he called me, when he was getting pissed up and being played for the fool he is. Yeah, John's not like that. John really respects you. I said, yeah, he'll respect me when he's had a flat of my hand around his chops, So, oh, no. So, well, you just tell him Lockwood owes him one. So, anyway, it'd be enough just to say boo.
Yeah, I know.
I'm watching shit his pants.
Yeah, from the Amazon. We mentioned contempt. You mentioned contempt.
Yeah.
We went through one contempt where someone tried to report you for contempt earlier.
Yeah.
You faced a few contempt of court charges.
Yeah.
Trial collapse?
I've had, a friend of mine was attacked by, it was in a massive fight. A group of rugby lads, mates of mine, went out for a Sunday afternoon drink, and they suddenly found themselves attacked by a huge mob of, I think they were, I'm not sure if they were Syrian, I think they were Iraqi refugees, I believe, that were being housed in Dewsbury, and there'd been a fallout between a couple of guys, and these guys just turned up with machetes and cricket bats and everything, and they attacked these guys, and one of them drove his car into them, and he hit my friend Lee Massey. Lee ended up in a coma. A couple of times they asked his wife to turn off his life support machine. She refused, and 3 months later he walked back into the consultant's office. He survived it. He came around.
He survived it?
Yeah. But it took the police nearly 2 years to arrest these guys, because they just then split, went everywhere. And at the trial itself, the judge he dismissed the charges against all but one of them, the guy that drove the car, because he said the landlord mixed up a couple of the identities. So two guys who had been stabbed, their wife and mother, were just outraged at this trial basically being just shelved. And so I reported that, and then the judge, Alistair McCallum, I think it was, if I've got his name right, he halted the trial, summoned me up for contempt because the case was still ongoing against this one guy that drove the car. Dismissed the jury. Said he was moving the trial from Leeds to Bradford Crown Court because of what I'd done, and why should he not charge me the full cost of what he'd had to do? And you're supposed to go in there and, cap in hand and sorry, Your Honour, blah blah blah. I went, yes, I'm really sorry, but I think you got it wrong. I said, apart from anything else, my local newspaper couldn't prejudice this trial because it took the police so long to find them, arrest them, bring the charges and everything else, that everything is in the public domain. That you couldn't draw a juror from my readership area because they're all tainted, if you like, with their understanding of what happened. And they followed this young man's story as he's recovered miraculously. So and so moving it from Leeds to Bradford makes no sense at all, because they're both 10 miles from Dewsbury and we don't circulate in that area. So your jury pool is not going to be, there's no way I could have prejudiced it. And really the bottom line on contempt is, one, apart from your respect for the proceeding and the law and the courts, is also, are you prejudicing the actual trial itself? So I argued, I thought fairly, that there was no way that we could be in contempt. And he kind of was going redder and redder. He said, we'll see what the Attorney General has to say about that. And stormed out, and you never hear anything about it. And there was another, there'd been a couple of other ones.
But he did collapse the trial, get a new jury,
and cost a fortune, unnecessarily. And the guy was found guilty and went down.
When I hear that, and I hear of, there's lots of circumstances like this, and I think I got 13 months in jail for just
and I was at the Old Bailey when it came second,
when they done me the second time.
Yeah, I was at the Old Bailey, and you understand more than probably anybody in the country, but I understand more than probably any journalist in the country, that the judiciary is not fit for purpose, that the system is now no longer fit for purpose. And what you witnessed in your, the egregious, the contemptible decisions made by Matthew Nicklin in that trial, I thought were just...
He was my Mackenzie friend, so people understand. I struggled, I didn't have a lawyer. I spent £100,000 on lawyers, couldn't afford any more lawyers. Danny agreed to be my Mackenzie friend because I knew he was aware of law, as aware of as a journalist, and so Danny agreed to help me with my trial.
Yeah, I sat there through every minute of it, and I witnessed what I thought was an absolutely appalling contempt by the judge. That's my opinion. The decision. Unfortunately, we now have a system where he is not just judge and jury; he is God, and you're having to live with the pain of that. Back in my day, I had it a little bit differently.
Because of the jury.
Because I had a jury in libel. But in the contempt, and been a couple of other contempts, and I was recently a Mackenzie friend in the family court for a woman whose son was taken away from her, funnily enough, by the Patel Mafia in Savilletown. Her drug dealing, armed robbery, father of her son, she didn't know when she got pregnant by him, was working for the Patel Mafia in Savilletown. So they funded all of his case when he wanted to come out of prison, and he suddenly wanted his son. She'd run out of money, so I agreed to be her Mackenzie friend. I exposed her corrupt lawyer who accepted a bribe off the Patels, accepted a bribe to get her and her son's passport so they couldn't go on holiday. I confronted him with that, got him out of the scene really quickly, and then I became a Mackenzie friend for her. Now, in the family court, you can report nothing, so there was no payback for me in this. I couldn't write the story at any point.
Did she get to keep her son?
So we get to the point where I've got a video of that little boy being dragged out from underneath the table in a police station by a detective chief inspector and physically dragged away and taken to his dad, who he's terrified of. I got photographs of where the kid's been beaten by his dad, who said, we were just playing around. So I was deliberately in contempt. I sent those videos and images to, among others, Shabir Pandor, leader of the council, to the Police and Crime Commissioner for West Yorkshire, to MPs. I sent it far and wide. Didn't put it in my paper because you're not short of that. But I was in contempt by spreading all of that. I was in contempt, and I knew it. But I also knew the judge in that case had vested interests, and I can't say why, because that would put me really in a spot. But on the final, when he finally came to the final decision, he gave custody to the dad for a while, but we kept on fighting, and then ultimately, on the final day, he stood up. He read out his verdict. He said, "I've had a real think about this." The mother, apart from anything else, was a registered foster carer. That's how suitable she was. She's a good woman. And he just did a 180-degree turn, and he awarded full custody to her.
If you had
wait. At which point, the solicitor for Kirklees Council gets up and says, "At this point, Your Honour, we want to bring contempt charges against Mr. Lockwood. He's been deliberately in contempt of this court, and we think you should charge him with contempt for spreading all these images and all this stuff." And the judge at that point but they said, "Well, I think on the whole, Mr. Lockwood was acting in the child's best interests. So, it was trying to do what was best for the child. So I'm not going to proceed with any action against Mr. Lockwood," which disappointed me, because if he'd have gone after me for contempt,
You'd have got him on what you had.
that would not have been in family court. That would have been back in open court system, and I could have brought evidence of what I knew had gone on between CAFCAS, which is the sort of like the child and family advisory service, social services, the Patel mafia, and that judge. I knew what had gone on, and I couldn't. It wasn't my forum to expose it, because I was just advising. I couldn't speak for you. I could only advise and help, and that's the situation I had with the mother in that case. But if they'd have come after me,
Then you'd have got it out in the public.
then I could have gone all guns.
With what you've experienced there, because I've how many mothers have had come up to me at English Defence League demonstrations, at demonstrations around the country, who have cried, have shown me pictures of their children, have said they've kidnapped, they've taken my kids off me, they've taken them. Yeah? Do you believe from your experience there that there is corruption involved in the taking of children?
There is corruption. There is also complete and utter innocent idiocy. You've got social workers that are 22, fresh out of university. They've only just started wiping their own houses, let alone passing judgment on a situation where you've got the guy in that case was quite a charming rogue. Yeah,
So he's come across as very nice.
One of the
He's a nice dad.
The lead woman in the case that's taking the child off the mother. She's basically she's an overweight 40-odd-year-old, and she's fallen in love with this charming rogue. He could never do anything wrong to the child. So yeah, do you want me to take you to where he grows his cannabis and where he stores all his stolen goods? Because I can show you.
That's the investigative journalist, Danny again.
Huh?
So your investigative powers come out again.
Well, you just do the job. You talk
you've
to
done the
people,
job.
you ask questions. You go poking and prodding where sometimes it might not be wise to. I've put myself in some occasionally.
You must have wound them up, the criminals I'm on about, the criminals from the Islamic community.
Well,
You must have been a thorn in their side more than any police investigator.
I mean, I got a phone call from a detective chief inspector once on the same A64 where I got run off by the armed police. It was about 5:30 in the morning. I got to Leeds Bradford Airport. I was flying down to Mallorca on a job. I'm also a golf journalist. But I says, "Yeah, Mr. Lockwood, yeah, we've got intelligence that a group of people of interest are trying to find out where you live." And this was after I'd moved over to the York area.
Once you've gone to York. So
Yeah. I said, "Okay." I said, "I could probably tell you who they are." He says, "Well, he said, are you worried?" I said, "Listen, the postman can't find our house." I said, if 4 of them characters come driving up and down our little country village, they're going to stand out like sore thumbs. I said, "No, the only worry I have is if you tell my wife, because then I'm in trouble."
I know the feeling.
No. I said, "Well, it's due diligence. We've got to do it. We'll inform our colleagues at North Yorkshire Police." I said, "Yeah, cool, whatever. I'll probably be seeing those guys, this week. I'll go wind them up a bit more, so because I know it was Zaman and his mates." So I don't. Yeah, it's just it comes with the territory. They know that they don't bother me. They're not.
But do you think that these sort of things are why some mainstream journalists don't investigate them? Do you know the basics? You're talking about threats. So you get your children were threatened. I know you've received dozens of threats. Threats. You're brushing them off quite as a man. But do you think this might be the reason why some mainstream journalists shy away from confronting this issue?
I don't know. I can't speak for them.
Yeah.
I can only say what I've seen. I've worked with some cracking journalists. I didn't learn all this myself.
It's only in the recent, my recent Telford Rape of Britain series. When they started blowing up 26 fire bombings, then they went to my mum's, then they went to other houses, then they went to all the victims' houses. And I thought, maybe this is why the journalists don't touch it.
Well, no.
For the first time.
But that would have happened to another journalist. That's because it was Tommy Robinson.
Yeah. If another journalist.
And the police are not absolutely not interested in protecting or investigating on your behalf. You know,
If they've done that to a mainstream journalist, they'd be the army.
Apart from the fact that mainstream journalists don't particularly do that. I mean, okay, so I have, but and I'm not kind of a hero here, by the way. You know, I try to be sensible about what I'm doing and where I'm doing it. There's no sort of gung-ho element to this. I am just doing a job at the bottom line, and you know, and I mean, certainly on my newspaper, The Press, I'm the publisher. I would have an editor, yeah, and it was a really good one. And so there were times when we were going to press, and I'd say to him, David, I'm accepting your resignation now.
Because you didn't want him to get the heat.
You know, if
we're running the story, it's not.
If the building's still standing on Monday, you can have your job back. You know, because I knew that we were pushing a bit too hard in particular directions. But that was just what the job was. And actually, when people know what they're dealing with, you know, it's by and large, they understand the laws, they understand the rules. There is no real mileage in them. I think we got a brick through our window once in 20 years, you know. Yeah. So
it's all a bit of fear tactics.
So yeah, and actually the intimidation and the bullying works for the most part. Yeah. You know, I mean, my little mate Terry's a man. He once went to the trouble of paying to have an entire newspaper published attacking me. Really.
What? And he's explained.
Well, because I'd just bust another one of his scams.
Yeah.
I'd exposed this massive real estate scam he had, and just God knows how much he'd lost with it. So he got this.
He must hate you, bro.
He got the son of an ex-mayor of Bradford to publish a newspaper, and he sent it. He sent it to every politician in Kirklees. He sent it to every newsagent because he was trying to get them to stop them selling
your papers.
Selling my papers.
Trying to affect your business.
He sent it to, because I owned a rugby league publication as well. He sent it to every rugby club in the country, and he sent it to everybody that lives in my village. And it was just a big picture of me, and the headline said, "Communities divided." You know, and then it was turning to page 2 and 3, and just this big attack on this man Lockwood is blah 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 blah. So I phoned the editor up. I says, "Where do you get that photograph on the front page?" He said, "Oh, I don't know why. I just off the internet." I says, "Because I have copyright on that. It's my photograph." I says, "That's going to cost you $6,000." So I said, I'll take out the court case now if you want."
They give you $6,000?
I don't think it.
Oh no,
it didn't end up being. It didn't end up being that much, but it signed me a nice big check.
Did he?
Yeah, I think it might have been about 600 quid.
Terry's a man. If you're watching this.
Yeah. So it was like, you know, so there's people coming out to the wife, because my wife is. I try to keep her oblivious to most of this. So there's people coming to the house saying, "Danny, we've just got a newspaper with you on the front page." I said, "It's a nice picture, though, isn't it?" So, hey, you know.
Talk to me about, there was a famous murder of a politician,
Joe Cox,
that was in Dewsbury.
Well, it was in Birstall.
In Birstall.
Birstall, you know, if Dewsbury was 2 miles from Batley Town Hall, Batley Town Hall's 2 miles sort of from Birstall.
Okay.
Joe's office was literally on the same street as mine in Batley, because by that time we'd moved offices from Dewsbury to Batley.
Okay.
And so it was literally 100 yards from Joe's office.
Did you know Joe?
I didn't know, no. Less than I knew other MPs, but then again, she hadn't been in the job that awfully long. You know, when you know, I mean, by this time, as a publisher, running 3 different publications, publishing books, and doing all the things that we did, I wasn't so much. You know, when we got big stories, that's when I put on the journalist's investigative trilby and got into it. But for the most part, I left it to my staff. So, but I was in the office that Thursday afternoon, and when I got a phone call from an ex-rugby pal of mine, and he'd witnessed it. He'd seen Thomas Mayer cross the street, shoot and stab her, and then take off on my friend Clark. He ran to his van. He ran to his van and set off trying to find Mayer, trying to track him down. And he was a witness at the trial at the Old Bailey, which I covered. The ironic thing is, and that was used to sow division again, and your name would have been thrown into the mix.
Britain first.
And
they tried to throw it on Britain first.
And Thomas Mayer's a far right extremist, and although he was far more influenced by South African
Was he?
the South Africa. Yeah, when they went finding evidence of his sort of political leanings in the house, there was all kinds of memorabilia. Some of it was Nazi, some of it was South African, a little bit of it was KKK, Ku Klux Klan, and he was a real oddball. And I actually helped another journalist who was trying to who got a commission to write a book on Mayer, And the fact is, he just literally was a blank page. He had no affiliations with anyone, anywhere in that town. And one of the strangest things for me is because this journalist friend of mine started writing to Mayer in prison, and finally got a reply. And Mayer said he would meet him, talk to him, because of course he gave no evidence, never said a word to anybody. And the one thing that they never found out was where he got that gun from. Now we know it was stolen from the back of a vehicle about probably 15, 18 miles away. He didn't drive. He had no way to get there. So wherever he got this, that's the one outstanding
Questions. Where did he get the firearm?
Where did he get the firearm?
Firearm was stolen weeks before, months before.
And so in this journalist who got Mayer's ear, we had the one chance to find out
Where did he get your gun?
where he get a gun, and they wouldn't allow him to visit.
They wouldn't allow him to question.
They wouldn't allow him to visit.
Why? Why? Because I saw a lot of questions over that case.
Yeah, there were things about it that just
Didn't add up.
just didn't.
Do you know
add
the
up.
witnesses? Talk to me about, you sat in on the court trial of this case, yeah? There was a handful of witnesses,
There were about, I think there were 7 or 8 gave evidence.
7 or 8 givens. They all gave different descriptions
Yeah,
of the killer.
yeah. I use that in my training because, of course, the judge could have, for instance, we go back to the Lee Massey one, where the judge threw out all those cases against the
Muslim
the
Iraqi refugees.
The refugees. Using that same logic, he could have thrown out the case against Mayer because he was this tall, he was this tall, he had this colour hair, he had no hair, he was wearing this sort of coat, that sort of coat. It's just everybody, and in fact,
That's what you spoke about earlier. There's how many different sides to the story?
how many different sides of the story. He said this, he shouted that. No, he didn't. He said this, and it was. He stabbed her first. No, he shot her first. It literally, and it was an exercise in what I try to teach. Yeah. But when you are traumatized like that, your brain's scrambled, and then ultimately it becomes affected by what you read or hear about it from other people
Afterwards.
And then by the time you've got to court 9 months later, it's so there has to be. The fact is, it was him. It was absolutely him. I mean, we watched the video evidence of it in court. Yeah,
She was a mother, right?
she was a mother. Yeah, 2 kids, and
I think her husband come out afterwards against me quite a few times. I don't even know.
well, he was an oddball. He never showed up he only showed up for the last day of the trial.
When he bit a sex
Now,
case.
I think that there had been complications in their marriage. Let's put it like that. And there were allegations about his behaviour at work.
Yeah, some charity.
So now her sister Kim Leadbeater is now
She's now the politician.
she's now the MP. Yeah, she got the job after Tracy Brabin went to be the
The EastEnders, the Coronation Street girl.
Coronation Street one. She went to be the mayor of West Yorkshire, the new sort of newly appointed mayor, did Tracy, and so Kim Leadbeater got the job, which was wonderfully ironic because she is now the poster girl for the Muslim community because they basically control it and her and all of the local politics, and of course she's a lesbian.
But she'll do whatever she'll do as she's told.
But we don't do that. I can't tell you if she's doing a good job or bad because I'm no longer. My newspaper closed down at the start of the pandemic, the press, and doesn't publish anymore. So
Can we get to what there was something around that, wasn't there as well, with regards to?
well, we lost. You can only do a job like ours as rigorously as we did for so long before it comes back to bite you on the backside, and it did. And ultimately, we had the local authority contract for all of their public notice advertising, which was a big part of our revenue stream. It had taken us, 15 years to win it off the Dewsbury Reporter. The Dewsbury Reporter were charging the council taxpayers of Kirklees an absolute fortune. They were pulling the council's pants down. It took us all those years to be able to competitively tender, and when we did and ticked all the boxes, we walked away with the contract and we were saving council taxpayers, I don't know, 100, 200,000 pounds a year. And yet it was still a big part of our revenue stream, you know, in a marketplace, obviously, which is declining because with the demographic changing as it does in Dewsbury and Batley, you know, becoming more and more Muslim, you've got less traditional advertisers for a product like ours. And so ultimately, the guy that awarded us the contract lost his job on the back of it. And they brought in another guy and he was basically told, get that contract off Lockwood. So they found the most ridiculous excuse for disbarring us from the tender process.
They disbarred you from even tendering.
Yeah. Well, they just said, yeah, you've actually on here, we'd phrased something wrongly, incorrectly, so we're ruling you out of the process. And they didn't even give the contract back to the Dewsbury reporter. They gave it to a media agency in Scotland.
How much for, John?
Well, it would have been if our contract was, if we were, I can't say, except it would have been an awful lot of money. And so all they did was buy the space from the Dewsbury reporter and take their 10% cut. And so and that basically finishes. After that, the business just really wasn't sustainable. But then, of course, literally pandemic came anyway, closed everything down, and we were sort of like swimming against the tide. And
Do you think you're the last of a generation? Do you think there's any investigative journalism going on now in Batley and Dewsbury?
No, there's no. Well, back when I ran the Dewsbury Reporter, and I was the acting managing director and editor-in-chief in the last year, on £3.5 million, I had 5 offices, 90 odd staff, and on the £3.5 million turnover, we made over £1 million profit my last year there, and and now they've got no offices and no staff. They have just a couple of nominal reporters working out of the Yorkshire Post Office in Leeds, and it's just all clickbait. They just lift stuff off Facebook. You know,
It's not journalism.
they wouldn't. You know, they couldn't find their way around the town without a sat nav, let alone understand it to the depth that we felt we had to in order to do a responsible job.
Do you think that our politicians should understand the different sects of Islam? After coming out of somewhere like Dewsbury, where you're aware of the Deobandis, you're aware of you've got some Sufis up there, right?
Yeah, Sufis, Barelvis. And that's why I say, you know, when I'm taking a journalist or an author, you know, round the town, I'm explaining the economics of the community as much as I am the politics and the religious elements of it. So, you know, they kind of our political classes kind of basically get Shia and Sunni, and beyond that, they're really not interested. You know, so it would be you'd like to think that they were informed. By and large, it just doesn't occur to them because it's a problem that they don't want to really address. It's something that they don't want to talk about, let alone deal with all of the complexities and the problems that it brings with it into a community and into a town. So, you know, I think it's out of sight, out of mind for the vast majority of them. And that's a shame. But then again, you look around at our political classes from, you know, clowns like Boris Johnson to, you know, someone like Rishi Sunak who's owned by a cabal of globalists. And, you know, I don't think he has, you know, here's me going off on one. But
Now let's go down there.
I don't think he has. He and Jeremy Hunt know that they're out of a job, you know, next autumn and the next year. They know. Headlines was a column that I've written since 1993. So 40 years on, I'm still writing the same headlines column on Facebook. You know, and I was Yorkshire Columnist of the Year. I won that award, and so I still write it and put it out online. And I have a go at all kinds of things from local in Kirklees, you know, giving Terry's a man a prod now and again, but also to everything that's out there that I still want to talk about. And I think Sunak and Hunt, they know what they're doing, and they'll be glad when they're out of there because their futures are assured outside of that viper's nest, which is the House of Commons. You know, so
What was your views on COVID?
you know what my views on COVID.
Yeah, I know. I want to hear it. I want to go there.
Yeah, well,
I want to go there because there weren't many people who, when I met, were as strong or passionately felt
about it as you did.
Yeah, I felt passionately about it.
You know,
Met you at the time.
I did. Here's one for you with the BBC, because I won't do the BBC anymore. I won't do news now. They kept asking me for a couple of years, and in the end, I just said, "Let's stop calling. I'm not going to do it with you." But I did a show 18 months ago, maybe 2 years now, and BBC Two were doing a series called Womanhood, and they had a bunch of female celebrities in a house in Batley, of all places. And they rang me up because I own a publication called Yorkshire Golfer to say, "Oh, Danny, do you know a golf club locally that we want to do a piece on, you know, the masculine element of golf clubs, and is it really, you know, is it bisexual?
Yeah.
Is it really respectful of women and inclusive?
Is golf misogynistic?
So
That's what they're trying to push.
So, and you can still, and it's still there online, and in the end they said, "Well, will you come and you'll be interviewed for it?" So I did, and I played I told an off-colour joke, a sort of really sort of sexist joke, because the two people who were interviewing me are Shirley Ballas from Strictly Come Dancing, and Kirsty Walk from Newsnight. So I know Kirsty, obviously, and Shirley comes in. So I give Shirley a putting lesson, and she's all glammed up, you know, and so she's, "I got a hole in one. I got a hole in one. You got a hole in one." She's just a putt. Yeah. So we're talking. They're interviewing me, and they said, "You know, so why do you play with women?" I said, "Well, I like to play around with women, you know, but so boom, boom, you know." I said, "But I play with men because, you know, because we can get things off our chest out on the golf course that you can't say in polite society anymore, you know." So, "Well, like what?" I said, "Well, here's one for you. Here's the Lockwood family." And we sat watching Strictly Come Dancing on a Saturday. Yeah. I said, "And here comes Shirley Ballas, rip-roo, you know, all glammed up." So Kirsty's going, "For God's sake," and Shirley's going. I said, "So the Lockwoods are sat watching, and Dad, me, says, oh, look at Shirley Ballas." Hold on. "I wouldn't half mind being casseroled by her." At which young Lockwood says, "Casserole, Dad? Don't you mean caressed?" "No, casserole, look it up. To be done slowly for 4.5 hours. So even Kirsty can't resist laughing. Yeah? Shirley's just absolutely in fits. I said, "Well, I don't think that's going to make the cut." You know,
He's making the cut of this.
So then, and I didn't see this until actually. So they go off and they're talking, and me and the guy that were being interviewed, we just stood on the putting.
Oh, mate, they'd want you arrested now.
No.
People would.
Well, so they're then doing a piece to camera. Yeah.
Yep.
And Kirsty says, "Well, Dan is this sort of gregarious, hail fellow, well-met kind of character. You know, he's obviously kind of macho sort of thing." And what did Shirley say? She says, "Yeah, it's such a sort of, you know, it's such a shame he's had his balls clipped." You know, so and that went in the show, so it was good. But your point was about COVID.
The humour.
So afterwards, we sat having a drink, and Kirsty said, "What's happening with your business, Danny, and all this and that?" And I'm talking her through it because the press had gone by then. So I explained, and she said, "Oh, that's a shame," and blah 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 blah. Have you had your booster?" And I said, "You what?" "No, I haven't, Kirsty." And I said, "Are you aware of the concerns that people have about the vaccines?" "Well, I'm aware of the conspiracy theories." I said, I don't think people like Dr. Peter McCullough, you know,
Conspiracy.
You know, have you heard of Ryan Cole? You know, and so and what really shocked me, Tommy, is that here's a woman, possibly the most senior journalist within the BBC environment, yeah, and she really wasn't aware
Of anything.
of what we were concerned about. Okay, the lockdowns are a different thing, you know, and they've been shown for what they were, you know, stupid beyond stupid. But in terms of, you know, you know, you look at Robert Malone and you look at some of the science and the worries that were flagged up real early on. I said, you know, if nothing else, as a journalist, you inform yourself. So I read widely. I've lost a lot of friends because I would be writing my headlines column. I lost family relationships. I lost friends because I was saying, and I wasn't pontificating or preaching. I sometimes do that, but I was trying to direct people towards the science to say, you make your own, you make your own mind up. My wife and my daughter had the jabs. My son didn't. He's an intelligent bloke. He read. I'm concerned, given that I've got a 0.001% chance of dying from this thing, being a healthy person with good vitamin D levels, and I don't think, and this thing has been rushed into the marketplace in no time at all. I'll give it a wait and see, if you like. So all I was trying to do was my job as a journalist, saying, hey, if you want to inform yourself about this, go look here or go look there. But the reason why ultimately now I say, I understand now, I could now, if I want, say, no.
Told you so.
Yeah, told you so. I'm not going to do that, because that doesn't help anybody. I just hope that you can now at least appreciate that what I was trying to do was as a responsible journalist, which is what we should do, not just swallow.
Just as a responsible human.
Just not swallow Big Pharma's narrative, the bought and paid for politicians. We've seen with the Matt Hancock WhatsApp messages, just exactly how self-serving and corrupt it was. So I don't get no satisfaction, if you like, out of saying, well, we were right. We still don't know exactly how deep the damage runs. I think this could be a generational thing. From the vaccine, and we won't get that until time has passed.
A lot of time.
So yeah, I took my position on it, I think, from an informed perspective. But it really shocked me that someone at the BBC like Kirsty was looking. I can tell, I can read people, and she was aghast. You don't believe, Kirsty? Have you not even, Are you aware of the Great Barrington Declaration? Are you aware of the credentials of the people who signed that?
Explain what that is, so people.
Well, the Great Barrington Declaration was very early in the piece. Was a massive piece of work that was submitted basically to the World Health Organization, to every medical and political community around the world, expressing the concerns at how the whole COVID pandemic was being handled, from start to finish, and it was just disregarded, despite the credentials of these world-leading, these eminent scientists and medics and academics. They were just dismissed as Fruit Loops. And the thing that gets me then about journalism, and the Gates Foundation, the biggest single funder of the BBC, for instance, and the Guardian, and organs of media like that. And you follow the money back, and there's so much evidence of this out there. They're basically buying the news narrative. So I don't remember the Daily Telegraph or the Times or anybody actually writing about the Great Barrington Declaration. You would at least have thought, we'll have a look at this and we'll examine it, and we'll, even if we're going to, on the balance of probabilities, dismiss it, you would at least, it's eminent enough that you would at least give it some form of regard, and it wasn't. And that speaks directly to the fact that the fix was in, the agenda was in. We are not going to question this. And we're seeing it now with net zero. We're seeing it with the whole, the Keir Starmer's just come out and said no more, sort of oil or gas licenses. Good God, that is guaranteed to impoverish the very poorest in our communities. People who can't afford gas and electric now, with the cost of living crisis, that will kill them off. And there's nothing no surer, and yet it's just glibly accepted as, well, we're following the science. No, you're not. There is not one single peer-reviewed study that shows man-made CO2 contributes to climate change. It's a fact,
So why do you think they're doing this? Why do you think the net zero?
Follow the money. I think ultimately it's an exercise in, and again, this all sounds conspiracy theorist.
Not for anyone who's researched it, doesn't it?
So forgive me if you think, oh God, any credibility that bloke had has just gone down the pan. No. If anything, over the last hour or so, I just hope that I've shown that I'm responsible enough and that I understand how to find things out. That's what we do. That's what I've been trained to do all my life. So I don't just assume a position and then pontificate about it.
Because I'm told to.
I actually look at it and then I look and see if I can debunk it. Well, what's the other side of that? That's what we should do. And as a result of that, well, yeah, you follow the money. You look at Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum. You look at all the puppets that he's brought through. The Justin Trudeau's, the Jacinda Ardern's, God help us. There's a generation of these people that are now in power, and they're singing to a particular song that we haven't been consulted about. So Agenda 2030, all the different things that are going on.
What's Agenda 2030 for those?
Again, if you follow the, if you want to look up the World Economic Forum, most people, if you're watching this, you'll be aware of it. And Klaus Schwab, and the fact that there is a widespread globalist, elitist agenda to basically unify global governance. Yeah, and we've got amendments to the World Health Organization remit going through right now as we talk, which will basically give unelected leader of the WHO the power to enforce lockdowns and vaccine mandates on us. Where did we get a vote on that? On whose manifesto was that? So there's all of this stuff going on in the background. Every government that I've heard of so far has said, yeah, we love the idea of a central bank digital currency. Well, once you have that, you have control of your people, just like the communist state in China. So, and people are oblivious to it, and it's not getting.
In other words, if you're not allowed to leave your 15-minute radius of 6 miles,
the
your bank card won't work.
Cities, we look at what Sadiq Khan's doing in London with the expanded ULEZ system. This is that with knobs on, because once they've got control of it, where you spend your, Mr. Lockwood, you've had, you bought 2 bottles of red wine this week and you've had 3 pints at the Grey Horse pub. We're stopping your money. Yeah. When they have control of that, they have
what you can buy.
So I was in London just a few weeks ago, and you'd love this. I went into 3 pubs. I was walking down to the Cadogan Hall, down off Sloane Square to watch a concert. And I went in 3 consecutive pubs, and I ordered a pint of beer, and they brought it. And I went to give them a tenner, and they said, "Sorry, we don't accept cash." And I walked out of all 3 pubs and just left the pint stood on the bar. Bugger off, This is legal tender. But of course, it's the direction of travel, and you see it in so many places.
There.
Yeah, and this is, and that's just a small element of the control freakery, which is being implemented and applied, unfortunately, at its fastest levels within democracies, within so-called democracies. Yeah, we don't believe that our people that we entrust to govern us can behave so malignly. My view is that they do. And where are the journalists holding them to account? Well, they're more interested in just, putting the boot into Boris over Partygate, which, is not going to affect anybody's whatever. It was wrong. It was wrong at the time. They knew. But you know what? More fool us for actually listening to them at the time. Should have come with me and 100,000 others and marched around London against the lockdowns, But I just fear that unless we really, really do protest and take a hard line, that society as we understand it is gone. So that's why, in a way, what's the future for Dewsbury? Well, the future for Dewsbury is tied up far less in its
Islamic
in the fact that Islamism controls every aspect of society in that town, pretty much. Because what's coming down on all of us at a rate of knots will just put that in the shade.
Yeah, that's what I've become. That's what my main things come thinking, because I always saw Islam as the biggest threat to the UK. And now I'm sitting thinking, it's pretty irrelevant.
It barely gets spoken about anymore.
No, it barely gets spoken about. Because the level of control of our freedom, of our liberty, of our everything, that's everything about who we are, is under threat.
It's
in
all
a much
there.
larger way.
And
they're telling everyone what they're doing.
The distractions are there. Ukraine, but that's not on the front pages anymore. That's not sexy. All of a sudden, it's Pride Month or week and
Pride year, isn't it?
And the trans agenda, and so
where do you think that fits into it?
Oh well, again, it's a distraction. It's the woke left, and they will become irrelevant in time. But this plays to the greater narrative in that it's got people looking away. We're not looking at the fact that
Our freedoms are about to disappear.
The fact that America is bankrupt. Yeah. The fact that we're not far behind. The fact that
they've been printing money.
You know, I mean, net zero. These just stop oil fulls. You know, people will not discuss the actual fact that there is no science.
There's no climate change
to back it up. There's climate change. It'll be raining tomorrow. Climate will have changed. You know, Antarctic sea ice is at record levels. The coral growth on the Great Barrier Reef is off the scale good.
But it's not to do with CO2.
But you know, and we don't need to talk about that because it suddenly did. There's been no measurable global warming for 10 years plus now. Zero. And so all of a sudden they don't talk about global warming, they talk about climate change. And let's just, you know, shuffle the deck chairs on the Titanic, still going down.
And there's some people making a hell of a lot of money out of it.
And making an awful lot of money out of it. And they control the media. Well, you know, something like 40%, I read this during the pandemic, something like 40% of all of the newspaper or media advertising in the US came via pharma.
Big pharma.
Big pharma. Yeah. Well, you're not going to throw away 40% of your revenue, are you? So, hey, you know, so somebody's pulling the strings. And it ain't Joe Biden and it ain't Rishi Sunak.
Joe Biden. In your opinion, in your own opinion, who is it? When we say they, I say they a lot. Yeah? We say they and they're going to do this and they're going to do that. What is they? Who is it that's implementing this world government? Who is it that's implementing the food shortages? Who is it that's...
Well, I mean, you can go back on the sort of the whole Rockefeller, Rothschild,
which used to be a conspiracy.
The big, it used to be, but it isn't. But you've got an elite now that includes people like Bill Gates and Zuckerberg, and you know, Elon's a little bit sort of out on his own up there. But there are a lot of people of that billionaire status who actually wield untold power, you know, and they're not accountable. So
corporations.
I'm not going. Let's just say it as it is: BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street. You know, who are they? Well, Vanguard are on your telly all the time. You know, invest through.
These are two companies that own the majority of the world. They own all the media in the world.
You know, if you look at the share,
they've funded both sides of every war in the world.
Yeah, they've they own everything. It don't matter if you
profit off war.
If you think Cadbury's are at war with Rowntree's, for instance, like whatever. Well, these guys own both of them.
In every sense, in every single sense. Battle.
So I think BlackRock have got something like 9 or 10 trillion dollars worth of assets under management. Vanguard might be 7 trillion, State Street 5, and then you come down to Morgan Stanley's and all the big investing institutions. And these people, so when they decide they are no longer going to put your pension fund money into Shell, BPS or whatever, yeah, it's all going to go into their green because they see the dollar that they're chasing is green. The money that they want to chase is green. So when they direct, you know, on a massive level, that is, you know, it's beyond governance.
Which is where we'll say feminism, or say now the non-binary identities, the they, the he. Yeah. When you see the mass corporations, it's coming from up there, because when they control all of this, then the big massive corporations, the big corporations that they control start telling all the staff to write in their emails, and before you know it, boom.
They're doing as they're told, you know, yeah. and so
it's just coming from.
It's so when you said they, you know, Larry Fink, is the CEO of BlackRock, you know.
You heard many politicians speak about these groups.
Well, no, because that's who they're going to be working for. That's where Sunak came from, and that's where Sunak's going back to. He'll be 2 years' time. He'll be living in California, and he'll be working. He'll have a senior job either with the UN or wherever. Yeah. But you know, he's minted anyway. What does he need 180 grand a year for as Prime Minister? He doesn't, unless it's to fulfil
an assignment.
For his hands. And that is my fear and suspicion. So,
Danny,
Tommy,
I thank you, man. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No, my pleasure.
It's been very interesting. I think a lot of people are going to be very interested by your views on all aspects. Well, I watched you talk on Brexit. I don't think there was anyone who portrayed Brexit or put across the Brexit argument as well as you did when I watched you on TV. So, and I think most people could get this from many angles or mmany political angles.
Yeah, it's you know, and I was in Morocco a few weeks ago with a group of European journalists. Yeah, and I lost a lot of those as friends because, you know, sitting around sitting around a table at a golf club in Brussels, I'd said, "So, Danny, you'll be voting against Brexit, won't you?" "Oh, no, I'll be voting." So my friend Roland Macheneau, "Danny, mon ami, why is this? You hate us, you hate us." I said, "No, I love you."
I just want to govern
I
myself.
said, "I love you, mate." And that's why we need to be out of it, because I do not believe in a supranational, unelected commission that's telling me how to live my life in Yorkshire. I said, and neither should you, neither should you.
The Yorkshireman again.
So the Yorkshireman again, English by birth, Yorkshire by the grace of God. So I said, no, it's because I love you and I want us all to have great relationships in a thriving, healthy neighbours, and not be ruled by a masked elite, which is what the EU Commission is. It's unelected, So it's pretty simple. I mean, I'm just a simple Yorkshireman, mate.
Well, it's been a pleasure, man, and I hope you join me again at some point.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Yeah, good luck with this project.
Thank you, Danny, man. Cheers. Carry on watching for more interesting guests. I'll talk to anyone. I'll debate anyone. I'll hear anyone's story. If you want to help me along that way, it's not free. I need your support. If you can support my family, that gives me my peace of mind. It means I can continue to do the work I do. You can do so at www.supporttommy.com. I appreciate every bit of support, as do my children. It gives me the ability to fly them out here to see me so I can stay in constant contact with them. I'm deplatformed and I'm censored, so I need you. I need you to share this content and make sure you stay tuned for upcoming weekly guests, interesting guests, exciting guests. I'm Tom Robson and this has been my podcast, Silenced.